Hey everybody, welcome to PDQ Live. I'm Jordan, Tara, and you can't see him right now, but Andrew's right there in that TV. Oh, there he is.
There he is.
He made it.
Oh, look at that face.
So today we're talking about Power Automate, which I think the initial takeaway is it does everything if you're willing to spend time in it.
I think that's perfectly analyzed. Yes, Jordan.
All right, so I guess the overall goal in this one is we kind of discovered we can't really come up with a whole lot of real-world solutions for every environment, but we can kind of give people a launching point where if they want to spend time, they'll be happy they did.
Yes.
All right.
I'm going to start by saying a couple things. We tried to get some Microsoft people in here, the experts. We failed. Okay. So we're going to do our best to provide a broad overview, and our only goal of the day is to kind of take away the fear factor of Power Automate. That's our goal. Okay.
Okay.
If we can do that, we'll succeed.
All right.
What do you think?
Well, sure, but do we want to talk about licensing? Because
No, I don't. It's awful. It's horrible. No. Okay, here's what I'm going to say about licensing.
Okay.
I don't even think Microsoft understands their licensing. That's what I think.
So there's an entire industry out there built around companies come in and help you solve Microsoft licensing because you never know what you actually owe them. And Power Automate takes that to a new level.
I agree. There's like 4 or 5 different levels.
It is something unique. But the one thing important, if you have an Office 365 license, you do have access to the basic connectors.
Yeah, if you have an E3 or an E5, you do, yeah. Even actually the free one, you have access to some connectors.
Yeah, so most of your personal automation, if you start doing more system stuff, like if you're looking for access to MS Graph or AI or starting to get real complex, you're looking at paying for extra licensing. File
system as well. Anything that is involving the on-prem gateway, anything moving files from on-prem, yes, you're looking at an extra license for sure.
But the
or 2.
Takeaway, if you are an Office 365 shop, everyone there has the basic connectors, and you can do a surprising amount with just those.
Yes, but I think what we should say is if you have questions on licensing, reach out to your rep. We're going to provide some documents, but it's kind of hard to discern what license you need. You almost need to say, this is the flow I want to build. Call your rep and say, what license do I need? And they'll help you.
Yeah.
That's, I think, the advice.
And so this morning, didn't you say that additional licenses, you have kind of a basic free, but then don't you have to pay for like every little thing after that almost?
On some of them, like Jordan said, each connector is different.
Yeah,
so yeah, that's why, I mean, we're being vague on purpose.
We couldn't say it. So
it's murky.
I do know if you start moving into the AI territory where there's extreme power, that's like $40 a month.
Yes.
There's no add-in for that. So that one's pricey if you start going into AI, but that you can do a whole bunch with that.
You can. The more complex your flow becomes, it's a good bet that the more license you will need. I think that's what we'll say.
Googlers in the chat, just start with the lowest license until you find something you can't do.
Yes, but what I did find is sometimes your flow will fail, and it will just fail and not give you an accurate error. And then you'll hit your head on the desk and go, why are you failing? And then it will pop up and say, premium license required. And you'll go, oh, so there's some frustration in that. Now
that we got the frustrating part with it, let's dive into what's awesome.
Okay, let's start. Okay, so I just want to start out by saying before we screen share, I think a lot of people naturally feel nervous about this product. So I'm just going to start off with the basics and encourage people to try some easy flows to get yourself comfortable with it. Okay, that's where we're going to start. Okay, so let's jump into it. So first off, you're going to go to just 365. So if you can share my screen, Kelly. So just log in to your 365, and then you're going to just come over here, and you're going to click on Power Automate. I already have mine open, so I'm just going to hop over here. So this is what it's going to look like. So it's kind of intimidating because you're like, where do I even start? What do I even do? So I'm just going to start with a couple things to tell you. If you break it out, you have triggers, and triggers are what is going to trigger your flow. Okay, so is it going to be automatic? Is it going to be scheduled? Just think of it that way. A trigger is what starts my flow. Okay, and then you can use a template. A template is a pre-built workflow. And in those workflows and templates, you're going to have actions. and an action is what that workflow is doing. So really, that's kind of it. If you just break those apart and kind of get that set in your mind, it makes it easier. Then you can further dive in and say, okay, within that, I'm going to have a scope. A scope is a nice little container that puts those actions in a way that makes sense. And then in that scope, I'm going to have connectors. And let's look at those first, because I think it's going to kind of help make sense of things.
It does sound like this is basically enterprise level, if this, then that.
It's exactly that. That's perfectly. Okay, so connectors, let's look at those first, because if I come over here on my sidebars, they're adding connectors all the time. There's literally hundreds, and this is what we kind of already talked about. Depending on your license will be the ones that you can use. So, of course, I have all of my 365 ones. And one thing I want to tell everybody is when you're looking, if you're searching by connectors, be careful. If you search by mail, it will, for some stupid reason, show you Outlook. And if you're in a 365 environment, don't pick that one, because that'll be 30 minutes of frustration for you. You want to pick Office 365. Okay, so see all these connectors. These all are going to have templates attached to them. So I can do anything with 365. I can do Twitter, RSS, SQL, of course, Azure. There's GitHub.
With Twitter, I believe there's been rumor that the API is going away. So Twitter's there now. I don't know if it will be available in the near future. If the API is gone, so will the connector.
I mean, will Twitter be there in the future? Let's face it.
I'm not diving into that one.
Yeah. Okay, but see, look, I mean, there are so many templates, it's crazy. It just goes on for days. Okay, so if I click on these, though, these are pre-made templates. Okay, this is going to already have the workflow in there for you.
It's pre-made connectors. It's not templates.
Well, these are templates. I'm sorry. If I come back over here, I'll show you. Sorry.
Okay.
So see how it says all templates? So I'm going to click on this one just to show you, okay, how it works. So I'm on templates right now, and this is definitely the easy way to do it. So I'm going to click on not that one, because remember, I just almost made the mistake I told you not to make. Save Outlook.com. I don't want to do that one. I want to do 365. So let's find 365. I think it's this one.
That's Outlook as well.
That's Outlook too. See, I think that's really stupid, this one.
Yeah, there you go.
See, how dumb is that, though? Why do they put those two at the top?
Because they are technically different applications.
I know, but see,
APIs.
these one, everyone's going to be, not everyone, but the majority of people are going to be 365.
They could maybe change up the color of the logos to make it a bit more clear. I understand they do have to be separate because the APIs are different, but they also don't have to have the identical logos.
Yeah. Okay, so if you click on this, it tells you exactly what it's going to do. I'm going to save email attachments from 365 to OneDrive for Business. So you see, I've already signed in here. It's really easy, though. You just enter your password. So, and then I'm going to hit continue. Okay. And I may have already done this. So it's already going to complete. So it tells you if an email comes into the inbox, and you can actually change this by just clicking over here. And if I want to just do a specific folder, I can. If I don't want to do the inbox, I can switch it up. I can click on advanced options here, and I can say, if I get an email from just Jordan, I only want to save the attachments from you. I can be really granular with this. I can do as much change as I want in here, and then I'm going to hide advanced options. And then this particular template has more actions down, and you can change these if you want. Again, change whatever you want. Okay, then we're going to go down to the next action. Okay, it's a step, but it's also an action. It's going to create a file in OneDrive, a file location where it's going to dump those attachments. So you're just following the breadcrumbs to see what it's going to do.
So my first thought, and this comes from it being an Exchange admin before online email was a big thing. Copying the extension is fine, but I'd love to yank out the extension and just leave a link to it so the database is smaller. It's becoming less critical as on-site Exchange is
huge.
It's shifting away slowly. But the idea of being able to stub, because PDFs can't be compressed, so your database just becomes unwieldy, would be a huge win. I didn't have time to dive into that, but it seems like this would be possible. If you're already copying it over, you just need another flow that says, if there is an attachment, strip it out and add a link.
I don't know if you can. You probably can. I mean, it seems like you would be able to. See, you can just add a new step and you could build on whatever you want, really. So now I have another operation, so you can build on from here. But let's pretend this is all done. So then I'm going to come back over to OneDrive, because remember we pointed here, email attachments from Power Automate, and it created this folder right here. The flow did. So here's all of my, there's my W4 in there. Sweet. Here's all. Yeah, let's open it. Let's look at all my tech stuff. Here's all of the attachments that it's pulled out of my email. So pretty nice, right? And Brock actually, he asked me to show him this, and he's like, well, what if it has a virus? And I'm like, well, that's actually a good point. So there's good and bad, right? But pretty slick and super easy, right? I just walked through the flow.
Well, even in the
Can
case
I look at the...
Go ahead.
Can I look at the trigger for this flow? I'm just curious for that template we were just looking at, because it looks like a bunch of stuff comes from the connector, right? I just kind of want to wrap my head around those connectors. Seem to provide you with a bunch of properties and a really good mechanism for flow, like, sending data between things and connecting things without you having to be a mastermind of APIs and know all about the Office 365 things. Well, you can just use this as a great starting point.
And that's why I said this is the easy way. So if you're a novice, if you've never done this before, you definitely want to go the template route, because, Andrew, to your point, the trigger's built in. So you see where my cursor is. The trigger on this one is when a new email arrives. So this is an instant trigger. An automatic trigger. This is what's going to trigger the workflow.
So anything that shows up in the email. So if you have folders set up and certain users go, you can just look at only one folder and have it do that with the...
yes, but the trigger here is as a new email arrives.
So what I was going to say to the virus is there are viruses out there where even if it opens up in the preview pane, it downloads the virus, where if you rip it out, you can still scan it before you open it. Copying it over is not going to do it. So
it's true.
It's not less secure, and it removes the preview pane as a area of risk.
Yeah.
But it's not ideal either. But.
But let's move away from here for just a second, and I'll come back to my flows in a minute. So let me just show you so we can kind of talk about the triggers. If I just come over here to create, and I'll show you how the triggers work a little bit. So here I would have an automated, and this is what's going to trigger my flow. This one would be automated, this would be instant, but let's do a scheduled flow now. So if you look at this as, I want to make my life easier. I want to take out some of the tedium in my day-to-day work. So for this, I'm gonna be a manager again. Okay, I'm a manager and I have a lot of employees, and I want to remember their birthday. Just something simple. Okay, that's going to be my use case for this. So I'm going to do a scheduled cloud flow, and Chase is my favorite employee. So I want to remember Chase's birthday. Or actually, I would probably go through every employee's birthday at this point, and I would just calendar it out. Okay, Chase's birthday is June 19th. So I'm going to say June 19th at 6:30 a.m. every 12 months. I'm going to have this be a recurring thing, okay? So this is my trigger. So a scheduled trigger every June 19th at 6:30 a.m. I'm going to create it. This is going to be my first trigger. My first step is a recurring trigger. Now I'm going to add a new step. And what I want it to do, and I'm going to be really specific in what I search for here. I want to do 365, see how it pulled up. And I learned that because it drove me absolutely crazy. So I can either do two things. I can click on this one, and then it gives me better options. So I want to send an email. And I only tell you that because I wasted too much time looking for that stupid Outlook. So what I'm going to do right here is I'm going to put Chase's email in here, and it's going to find him. And I'm going to say, oh my gosh, I love Chase. Happy birthday. You're the best.
No, this seems so genuine and not...
I know. Okay, but just pretend I'm a manager here, right? And this is part of my work. I'm going to have to do it anyway. And then I'm going to copy you so you know it's also Chase's birthday, and you can wish him a happy birthday as well. Okay? So let's just walk through the steps. Now I've just taken this off my plate for all the years that Chase is going to work for me. It's going to, every year, send out this email. It's going to copy you and anyone else that I put on here, and I don't have to do it ever again. So I would save this. Now, let's save it just so I can walk you through the process. And let's not limit this just to birthdays. This could be a meeting. We have a monthly one-on-one, you and I, Jordan, and I want to remind you 30 minutes before it begins, I could do that as well. I could add a step to reference my Outlook calendar and send you a reminder and say, don't forget our meeting.
Yeah. Right. So we've been showing a bunch of personal ones, like individuals, not usually going to be time savers, just basically to help you keep on track with
just
things.
Just automate your life, yeah.
But for the other part, for the business side,
yeah.
So some of the connectors that I've seen, like there's multiple ticketing systems in there.
Yeah.
Where you could have, I just don't have access to a ticketing system or a remote system. But if you're a help desk person, you could have a entry in there where if you hit a certain button, it will go through and it'll find out the connection string if you need to remote it to the computer. So instead of having to talk them through finding it or go through look it up, you can automate a lot of that.
Yep, we're going to do an automation flow after this one. I'll show you. But so let me just finish this really quick. So I've made my flow now. So one really cool thing about Power Automate is I can come up here and hit Flow Checker, and it's going to make sure I didn't make any mistakes. So in this particular flow, it's pretty simple. So I didn't do anything wrong. So yay. And then the next step is I'm going to hit Test right here. And there's two ways you can test it. I can do manual or I can do automatic. So in this, I'm going to hit manual, and then I'm just going to hit test. And then I'm going to run the flow.
So automatic shows up if it's already initiated one time. You can just go through and you can go through and find a previous one where it ran.
Yes, or if in the case I'll show you in one where we're actually going to move a file. I will move a file to that location. Okay. So let's do that one next. So let's go over to these flows. So I'm going to come back to my flows. Now these are ones that I've already done. So you see when we did the Save 365 email attachments to OneDrive. So I did a similar one for Gmail, and it works in exactly the same way. It strips my attachments from Gmail and it puts them in Google Drive. Pretty handy, right? I actually really love that one. We're going to do that one next, but let's do this create PDF one because I love this one. So I'm going to drill down into it. So from my flows right here, I can see a lot of information about it. I can see all the runs. So if you do have an error on a flow and you're like, why aren't you working? This is where you would see. So the first time I ran it, I did have an error. And if I expand this out, it will tell me what I did wrong. So you can spot check your errors. Okay, but let's take a look at this one. Okay, so over here are all my connections. So let's edit this flow and we can go over the workflow here. Okay, this trigger is when a file is created. Now, I've specified the folder. So when a file is created in this location, and now how I did that is I clicked on here and specified where I was talking about. Okay, so this is my OneDrive for business. And I am me, so I have 90,000 files. Okay, so where did I go? Now I even lost where I went. I went content. I'll just go there. So OneDrive, my files, and you're going to do the same thing. You're going to know where you want to put something, and then you're going to Power Automate. Okay, so this is where I'm going to start. Now let's go back to our flow, pardon me. So advanced options. I have nothing else in here. Okay, that's our trigger. That's step one. Okay, next step. In this flow, I'm asking this to take a Word doc and convert it to a PDF. Okay, so it's going to look in this OneDrive in this path, and it's going to convert it to a PDF. Now, this right here is a dynamic entry. And how I got it to be dynamic is I click in here, and you see right here, you see all these dynamic entries that I can populate right here? That's because I don't want it to look for one file name. I want it to be dynamic. So anything that dumps in here that's a Word doc, it's going to know to convert that because I put a dynamic entry in there, right? Okay, so let's move on. Then the next thing I want it to do after it's converted that Word doc to a PDF is I want it to go to the SharePoint site, and I created a SharePoint site. So now, do you see how this is now an org workflow? So let's pretend this is a finance. This is a shared mailbox for our premise. This is maybe an accounts payable, accounts receivable that comes into a shared mailbox, and you want to convert it to a PDF for whatever reason. So you want to dump it into a SharePoint site. Okay. This is just a use case I'm just providing you. So it's going to dump it here. So now let's jump over to a SharePoint site. See how I have PDFs? this is where it's going to end up. So let's come back over here. Again, these are dynamic entries, and I populated them same way, exact same way. And then to end, it's going to send a message to a Teams saying, hey, we converted that file for you. So we'll tell the finance team this has been done. So should we see if this one works?
Give it a go.
Okay. So I'm going to come back to my OneDrive location, and I'm going to upload a Word doc. So let's upload password keepers. And one thing I will say is some of these flows are not quick. They're not. I'm not gonna sugarcoat it. Some of them are a little bit slow. So we'll see how quick this happens. So let's go back here. I'm going to come back to, and I'll actually, this is a good time to tell you this. So if I go test flow, I can do it manually, but this is already going to be triggered automatically because the trigger is when a file shows up in this location. But just for fun, let's trigger it anyway. And it'll probably sit and hang for a second. Yeah. See how it says right here, to see it work, add a file to your OneDrive, the OneDrive folder you selected. And from playing with this all week, I notice it does kind of chug right here. But if I come back and click on my flow and find the one that we just were dealing with, which is this one, if I come back here and I look at my flow, it looks like it already succeeded. So let's go find out if it did. And the way I'll find out if it did is I'll come back up to my SharePoint site and yay, there it is. So I uploaded Password Keeper, which was a Word doc. And now look, it converted it to a PDF. So the final step is we're going to come up to our Teams and see if it told us that, yay, and it told us it converted it to a PDF.
Okay, so it seems like...
So you were able to connect, you were able to connect 3 different 365 services, right? You had OneDrive, you had SharePoint, and you had Teams, and there's even more possibilities. So this could really be catered to any kind of workflow that you have in your organization.
Oh yeah, you could go on and on. Yeah, I mean, you could really go on and on. Yeah.
All right, so let's show a more sysadmin level one. I saw you had one for users.
Okay, I only want to show this one, and we're not going to dive too deep into it, but I do want to show this one because do you remember when you were automating Azure and creating users in PowerShell a couple months ago? Mm-hmm. And one of the viewers said, could you use Power Automate to automate user creation?
Yes.
Okay, well, so the answer is yes. Okay. So I want to show that just briefly. We're not going to go all the way through it, but here's the flow to do that. This one was not easy, is what I'll tell you. And I want to say you're definitely going to be careful with this one. Okay, so here's this one. So let's edit it so we can look at the details.
So what we're going to do is the Azure AD connector is a basic one that comes with any account. If you're looking for the Graph or the Azure DevOps, those ones are premium ones.
Yeah,
so, but the main one for Azure AD, that one is a basic.
Yes, and this one's a little bit different because you see the brown. The brown is what's called a scope, and we talked about that initially. The scope is a container that you're going to group your actions in. So it is a little bit different than the ones we looked at, but we're not going to waste a whole bunch of time. So again, I'm going to manually trigger this flow. Okay, and this flow, the manual trigger is this document that I just made. Well, I made it yesterday, but this is pretend the HR made this document. Okay, so they're going to dump an Excel file or a CSV, however you want to do it, and they're going to populate this information, okay?
Looking at the manager, congrats on your promotion.
I know, right? Well, these are all my old help desk people except for Don. He's the IT manager, IT director, which actually reports to me, which is funny. Okay, next step, which is actually a scope. Look how it says list rows present in the table. Okay, it's pointing to a location, which is the OneDrive for Business that I just showed you. And it's pointing to this file. And within that file, it's pointing to a table. Okay, so it's going to reference those values in the table. And that's important that those match up. So again, like you said at the beginning, Jordan, it does take time. If you spend the time setting this up, though, it is worth it because it will automate it. So then we add another action, and the next one is the scope that contains actions. add the users to Azure. So part of this scope was I had to validate my credentials to Azure. Okay, so another dynamic entry. You see how it's dynamic? I need it to be dynamic right here. Then I'm going to create the user. And I had to add all of these fields dynamically. So again, I'm just going to say this one did take a while, but I think it's worth it.
So in that one, and with any automation, if the Excel spreadsheet changes or they add a new column, you're going to have to update here. But that's true of any automation.
Any automation,
how you're getting the data changes, you're making changes.
Yeah, you can't mess with that. Yeah, exactly right. You said it perfectly. So anything that I want to populate in Azure has to be exactly the same on both ends. These are all dynamic entries. And then I'm going to come back down here. This one got a little janky, I will tell you. So definitely do your research to make sure this is right. I had to reverse these. There is a little bit of a glitch to get the UPN correct. So I had to add the manager first and find the manager ID. I don't know why, but anyway, that's why the order looks a little bit weird. So a little bit complicated, but it does work. It will create your users in Azure.
It's one of those. If you're not covered with PowerShell, which is how I did it, and I did a lot to bypass authentication. This has all of that stuff built into it because it's a valid connect. You're just providing your credentials and it stores them for you.
It does
securely.
And I actually did want to mention one more thing because we talked about it before. So you remember how we dynamically assigned our licenses, Jordan, and we made our dynamic groups based on city state. If you're assigning these here properly, your licenses will also be assigned automatically. So,
which will give them access to Power Automate.
Yes, and then they can do their user-based flows as well. Yes, Jordan,
Makes everyone happy.
Makes everyone happy, correct.
You guys ready for questions?
Let's do them.
Yes.
There are a few.
Okay.
License included in Microsoft Business Premium? Steve's.
Yes, it is, but like we said in the beginning, so I do have a license, a premium license. So I have an E3 with PDQ. I did run into problems with transferring the on-prem file system ones. It yelled at me there, and it wanted me to add an ad hoc one. And so that's why I'm being so vague about the licensing, because I really can't answer that exactly which one you need.
But it does give them Azure AD as well as the ability to access SharePoint, Twitter. So, and
exactly.
And I believe multiple of the ticket system, I didn't dive into all of them, but most of those are basic too. I know the Asana one is basic, so you can.
I could do
tests.
Asana. Yeah. I didn't want to show you Asana because I didn't want you to freak out, but I could do Asana.
No, I'm adding automation so I don't freak out.
The only one that I couldn't do was the file system that involved an on-prem file system with the basic Power Automate.
Okay. We have a question from Adam N. So does this have anything to do with that system tray icon that starts with my Windows 11?
So there is a Power Automate desktop app, which opens up a lot of other possibilities. So if that's installed, yes. But if you don't have Power Automate installed in the desktop, there shouldn't be a system.
Those are also desktop flows, not cloud flows, which we looked at cloud flows today. So
desktop flows is where you're going to get things like PowerShell and a whole lot of the stuff that I'm more comfortable with.
Well, and just
there's also some really cool
go ahead,
RPA stuff, but go ahead.
Just to segue,
like web scraper stuff is awesome.
Because that's actually a really good segue. The Power Automate for desktop is a whole new world. And once you've built all these flows, because you notice a lot of the things we did today are user-based flows, and you may be saying, well, how is this going to help me? Once you build these flows, what you eventually will do is you'll turn them into Power Apps, and then you'll, of course, use deploy and inventory to push those out to your users. And when they launch the Power App on their desktop, it will ask them to sign in as themselves, and they will also be able to run their flows as themselves. So we'll do those in later episodes. It was just way too much to cover in one. And there's also mobile Power Automate. And the mobile Power Automate, as Andrew found out, allows you to trigger events as well. So there's so much more that we didn't even get to today.
Okay. Here's one that you basically just went over. Can this be used to automate creating new users and add them to security groups?
Absolutely.
A little bit of work, but once you have the process dialed in, it's going to save you a lot of time.
Oh, yeah. Jordan actually said yesterday, if he was back in the world of sysadmin, you'd never leave your office or talk to anyone again. You'd just master Power Automate.
I would I'd automate as much as my job as I possibly could away.
Yeah, for sure.
Steven in the chat had something interesting to say about a flow you were looking at earlier that triggered on an email in a folder. And he was saying that could be used as a way to connect auto reports from PDQ inventory with cloud flows, right? Because an email will be sent on a schedule, and then that can be, you schedule that to go to a certain folder, and then that triggers your flow and you do something with that information, or you can connect things in interesting ways. Like we've shown so far, this is a huge toolbox, and really the creativity is there to choose your own adventure.
For sure. And I just want to reiterate, the reason we started so basic today is because I think it can be super overwhelming. And I think a good way to start with the really simple templates is just build that comfortability level and get you to the point where you can go, oh, okay, I can do this. I can do the multi-step one. So I understand that today was a little rudimentary, but it was intentional. Because, the flows are phenomenal in the way you can intermix things and add steps. You can get super granular, and it is very powerful.
And I think Andrew
kind of that fear of the blank slate.
Yes.
And Andrew kind of answered this next question from Marcel. How is this useful in connection with PDQ inventory and PDQ deploy?
There's that. There's also, if you are using the desktop, which we didn't go into in this one, on your machine, you could use the command line, like with automation, the command line to initiate different scans or deployments. It'd require a little bit of work, but it could work. But there is no open API for the products, which limits it to what you could run with command line.
I smell another video, Power Automate with DNI.
With the desktop app?
Yeah.
We could make it work.
Okay, let's do it.
There's a lot of cool stuff there.
Next question from Emily. I'd like to create a recurring flowchart / process where we can check off something that was done, which would then prompt the next employee to take an action. Is that something Power Automate can do?
Yeah, it absolutely can. And like approvals for managers to approve stuff. HR can do it, where you can do onboarding. Absolutely. And so that was what we were kind of thinking. Part 2 was going to be the harder kind of steps. So that we were already kind of planning to do that. And you absolutely can do exactly what you're asking to do.
The main thing for that is you have to, the flow is not going to be fully automatic because it's going to require the employees in question to do something. Either it's close a task or perform some action where it kicks off the next part. So if you have a ticket system and you can sync with that one, you could have it if ever they fill out a certain field, it moves on to the next one or however that goes. Or if you have the email, you can have it when an email comes in, or you could have it if you flag an email a certain way. So there's lots of options. It's however your team is communicating, they just need something that they can do to trigger the next step, but it can work.
Yeah, and so just so everybody knows, really the plan that we were going to do for part 2 and however many more we do is we're going to actually get a subject matter expert to come in here and teach us really the perfect way to do it. So that's the plan, is to get really deep in the weeds in this next time.
Okay. Next question. And I don't know if you can do this. Can you go over how template equals get notified when you're at mentioned email? I set it up, but it never triggers.
Can you go over how template get notified when you're at mentioned in email? You know what? I did not go over that one. I did see the template, so I can't answer that. But do me a favor, email Kelly, and I'll tell you later. I'm happy to follow up with you after. I don't know that I'd be able to do it on the fly right this second. I know what you're talking about, but if you send Kelly your email, I'm happy to follow up with you after.
Or I'll just answer your question. Yeah, because I got that kind of skill. Next question. How can this be used to actually save time? All the templates so far seem gimmicky.
Well, so I think I answered that because I purposely started really, really simply on the user-based templates just to kind of get you in the mindset, and then moved kind of time the org ones later. So the converting a Word to a PDF was just try to get you thinking more org-based.
Yeah, it is extremely powerful, and you can automate out a lot. It's just it's hard for us to show because every environment's unique.
Yes,
and there's a whole bunch. So this one is more of a here's an intro to it. But if you have something that you do semi-regularly that you don't enjoy, if you spend time in Power Automate, you can make that process go away.
Yeah, and I would suggest if you already are comfortable with Power Automate and you don't want the gimmicky ones, start with the file system, search for file system, and search for scope.
Azure AD as well.
And Azure AD, that's going to open up a whole bunch of power that you're probably looking for.
Tara, I think that what you showed earlier with the Automate sending a happy birthday reminder, some slight modifications to that, and you are working with automating the new hire correspondence from the IT team, right?
Yeah.
You just change the trigger and then you're automating like, hey, here's how you use our IT, welcome, and you never have to send that email again.
Well, and also, Andrew, adding that as a step to your onboarding process, that can be a step to any flow. It doesn't need to be its own flow. So ideally, that would be part of your onboarding process with HR in conjunction with the approval process. You know how they were talking about this is step 1, step 2. So your onboarding and offboarding process could potentially be 20 steps. So they could be a one flow, or they could be in conjunction with a whole bunch of others. They don't need to be alone or siloed. That's the whole idea. Put them together.
All right, we have 2 more questions, and I think this one actually may have been answered in the chat, but can the desktop version be used to create Windows macros to repeat tasks between open programs, e.g. copy from Excel, paste in a browser field, click OK, etc.? Mikey B.
Absolutely. So the desktop one, instead of the cloud flow, it's all the things you can normally do on your desktop. It's a lot more user logged on control, where PowerShell command line, anything that opens in the browser, executing applications, all of that works really well with the desktop app. We were thinking that one would be its own webcast because it is powerful in its own way. It's just very different from online flows.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
All right, our final question. I'll let you 2 fight this one out. Only so many hours in a day should I learn Power Automate or PowerShell?
What's your take, Jordan?
My take? I mean, I'm PowerShell, but are you more comfortable with GUI type stuff, or are you more comfortable with command line? But both of them are extremely powerful, and you can use them both.
I think it goes to what problem are you trying to solve right now? What are you passionate about right now? If you're going to be using Power Automate for a project and think it's worth the curve, go for it. If you are really feeling some PowerShell and it's going to be valuable to your organization, focus on that. But there's a lot of crossover as well. PowerShell can be used to take Power Automate to the next level and provide you connectors that don't exist yet and tie things together in an even more advanced way. So whatever you're doing, just keep learning and keep growing.
I think PowerShell is going to be more transferable between jobs because there's the environment specifics not there. And then even if they're not a Windows shop, PowerShell can still work. So I think PowerShell is more versatile, but obviously I am not an unbiased source on that one. I'm very, very passionate about PowerShell. So
yeah, PowerShell will teach you so many things that will make Power Automate so easy.
Yep.
So the answer is just learn both.
Just learn everything.
learn PowerShell, and then if you feel the need, move on. All right. Thanks for everybody for tuning in. Thanks for all your prep work on this, Tara. I know you helped out a lot on this. You did a whole bunch of this. I know we didn't get a lot into deep dive examples, but it's difficult because it's very environment specific. So this is just something to see where you get kind of a very entry level to encourage people to go spend time in it. And I think you'll get benefit from it.
But I would really love to hear in the comments what more stuff people would like to learn, and we will find the people to come teach it to you if we don't know how to do it. Really, I really am interested to know what people want to hear.
All right. For PDQ, I'm Jordan.
I'm Tara.